Hi, I'm Pauline Harrison from the Fintech Times, and I'm here at PAY360 with Lord Chris Holmes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. How are you finding everything so far?
Brilliant. What a great vibe just to have this many people coming to talk about the vast range of subjects. Good energy.
Fantastic, yeah, definitely. Before we get started with some questions, why don't you just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and the kind of things that you do in your day-to-day role?
Surely. I'm Lord Holmes of Richmond. Call me Chris. And my main areas are all around enabling people through fintech, through new technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, and really looking for the use cases. Never technology for technology's sake, but where we can solve problems, where we can take issues away, where we can drive technology for public good, for private good. Obviously payments, a key part of all of that.
Fantastic stuff. And I know that you've been speaking at the conference on cashless societies and things like that. So I'd really love to know your thoughts on whether we should be embracing this cashless society and the pros and cons of that kind of thing.
I think we have to think very seriously about cash. Cash still matters. It matters materially to millions. The inevitable future is digital, but that future has to be inclusive. Crucially, the transition to that future has to be inclusive. And even when we're there, I believe there'll still be a role for cash in terms of critical national infrastructure, in terms of resilience. So I don't think in any sense we should be writing cash off. We should be supporting it in the right way, not least for the millions who rely on it.
Absolutely, and I suppose following on from that, do you think a cashless society will be accessible enough for everyone in the future?
A cashless society has to be inclusive for everybody, otherwise it's nothing. As with every part of our economy, every part of our society, things are either inclusive by design or they really shouldn't have any place in our future. So digital finance, digital payments have to be inclusive. I've put an amendment down to the current Financial Services and Markets Bill to exactly this effect. I believe the government should have commission a review into access to digital financial products. Payments obviously a key part of that. It's essential that we make that future inclusive, that we make the transition to that future inclusive, and that we fundamentally continue to understand the role that cash needs to play throughout all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think obviously we're talking a lot about financial inclusion here, but what does that phrase mean to you specifically?
Financial inclusion to me means every citizen, every small business, every part of our economy, every part of our society enabled, empowered through every part of what finance is and what finance can be. So payments are a critical part of that. They underpin so many elements of our life. But credit, being able to take a reimagined view of credit, not to increase risk, but to be able to reimagine credit with what we can now do with fintechs to enable people to avail themselves of those types of financial products where in the past they've been unfairly shut out for want of traditional financial services, considering them correctly and taking the time, being bothered to understand their context, their perspective, and how they could, how they should, and now how they must be financially included.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really great way of putting it. And I guess, do you think that finance and fintech is succeeding in providing this inclusion? Like, is the industry accessible enough, do you think?
Fintech and fintechs across the country are doing some great product, some great work when it comes to financial inclusion. Perhaps one of the greatest examples, when we saw the beginning of lockdown, the issues that was causing, as well as obviously the health crisis, how finance was a key element that needs to be considered at that time. So many fintechs off the side of their desks coming up with potential solutions to get finance to people who are having to self-isolate. In the most simple of terms, to be enabled to carry on eating. You can't get more fundamental than that. Great to see fintechs involved there. When we look about what fintechs are doing in terms of credit, alternative products, enabling people into the mortgage market, enabling payments to come in a more concise way, enabling wages to be leveraged in a way which is beneficial for both parties, but in a way again that doesn't increase risk. What's fantastic is how so many fintechs have that sense of purpose about them, and they really are getting after so many of these issues that have been ill or unconsidered by traditional finance for far too long.
Fantastic. And I guess where are the gaps then? Where do you think fintech could be doing more?
The biggest issue for fintech is scale. We want to ensure that the UK is the best place on the planet to start up, scale up, and if you so choose, to sell up your fintech business. And that scale up is critical. So great to see the initiative with the Scale Up Sandbox. Great to see the stand-up of the Centre for Finance, Innovation and Technology. We don't just need 1, 2, 3, half a dozen fintechs. We need a whole ecosystem, a whole environment of scaling fintechs to ensure that wherever you happen to be in the country, whatever your financial need is, there's a fintech there ready to give you a personalised, ready to give you a real user experience.
Amazing, of course, absolutely. And I suppose, do you have any personal experiences of some challenges in accessing finance and financial products?
Very much so. If I just bring one to bear from just a few weeks ago, I was having a lunch meeting, and when it came to payment, I was ready to pay, and a card reader was presented to me with a completely flat screen, so no buttons on it, no little dot for the 5, no raised key, completely inaccessible to me. And the reality is, though it wasn't intended, whoever you are, whenever you have that kind of experience, it's not a cerebral experience, you always feel it in your guts. And it's avoidable if everybody focuses on inclusive by design. And what's most disappointing about that specific example, it's taking something which was previously accessible and then making it inaccessible. It's difficult enough to get everything inclusive by design from a start off, but it's terribly disappointing when something which was previously accessible for no benefit to the consumer, for no benefit to the economy, is made inaccessible.
It's going in the wrong direction, isn't it? Just purely to look fancier or more technology.
For sure.
But I mean, why is diversity and inclusion important? Obviously, it's very important, but I'd love to hear in your words why it's so important to be in this industry.
Diversity and inclusion is the golden thread. It's the golden thread that should run through everything. In Parliament and beyond, I try and align all of my work around talent and technology, inclusion and innovation, and it is inclusion which is the spark which will lead and create that innovation. So diversity of individuals for sure, diversity of thought, you bet. It's the only way that organisations, institutions, businesses can be optimal, can come up with the best product, can come up with the best payment methodology, can truly serve their customers, communities, society and country in the most effective and the most energizing way. There is no more a golden thread than inclusion and diversity.
No, I absolutely agree. And you mentioned your work there. I'd love to know some ways that you're championing diversity, inclusion and all the things that you do.
Certainly, in everything that I do in Parliament and beyond, it's all rooted in inclusion and diversity. So, for example, we've currently got the Financial Services and the Markets Bill going through Parliament. So I've put amendments down to that to enable access to cash, a clear inclusion issue, to have an access to digital financial services review, to enable everyone to have an inclusive experience when it comes to financial services. Broader than that, I've done reviews into access to public appointments. Now, many people may not even know what public appointments are, but these are the individuals that sit on boards who are responsible for the deployment of well over 200 billion of taxpayers, of our money. Really important roles. We have to ensure that they are diverse and that those bodies are inclusive. So for me, it's the golden thread that runs through everything that I'm trying to do.
And do you think more provisions need to be made in order to help, disabled individuals and people that have additional needs to help them work in the industry?
There's no question that more needs to be done to enable the industry to be more diverse and more inclusive across the piece. When one considers that 94% of fintechs don't have a disabled person on their staff, there's plenty to be done. But it's beyond disabled people, it's beyond protected characteristics. If we can really strain every sinew to construct and enable inclusive cultures, crucially inclusive leadership, then those organisations will inevitably, by design, become diverse. And what I say to any organisation, it's as simple as this. Right now, become diverse or die. That death may be slow, it may be overnight, but rightly, if an organisation isn't representative of, isn't representative for, isn't inclusive by design in terms of org structure, in terms of personnel, in terms of culture, in terms of product, in terms of every single beat point, be diverse or die.
And that's some very wise words there for sure. And then just finally, I'd just love to know, what are your hopes for the future in terms of financial inclusion and that accessibility that we've been talking about?
My hope is that we enable and we empower a society, an economy, cities, communities, country, which is financially included, which is inclusive by design, where all of that bright, brilliant talent, wherever it is enabled and is empowered. Because here's the great joy of financial inclusion. It's not just about social, it's not just about thinking of it in terms of HR or CSR. This makes social, psychological, it makes economic sense. If we are to be the nation we could be, if we are to drive economic growth, if we are to be the best nation to start, scale and sell fintech businesses, then that needs to be all predicated on that great golden thread of inclusion and diversity. Financial inclusion, absolutely critical to that. It's why I keep on the government's case about it. It's why we need to have financial literacy in our schools, right from kindergarten, right the way through life. We need everybody to be comfortable, financially literate, data literate, digital literate, to enable everybody to play their full part economically, socially, crucially, humanly.
Amazing. Well, Lord Holmes, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Absolute pleasure to be here. To everybody, do be in touch on LinkedIn. Love to hear all your perspectives, all your views. Please do be in touch. Thanks very much indeed.